Today we're speaking with Steve Downer, and the topic we're going to discuss is blockchain and quantum computing, the opportunities and threats. So, Steve, before you start, can you provide us with a brief background of yourself?
Yeah, sure. I was originally from Guyana in South America and left there when I was quite young and moved over to the UK where I spent 23 years. My formative years, my education was there. And I guess it was that diversity, that kind of melting pot that sparked a number of like triggers in my mind, and from there on, like the pattern recognition really kicked in at an early age, and I grew to have a deep interest in everything technology, but also human history and where that would lead. So to cut a very long story short, I ended up in the information technology sector, and that evolved into information security, which ultimately led me down a path towards blockchain technology and ultimately quantum computing. In terms of the theoretical understanding of quantum computing. And as a result of that, I've been able to trademark an innovation which is called Rapid Aqua Life Save. And that is basically an innovation which pulls a lot of great ideas together in order to save human lives in real time using satellite technology, blockchain, and right at the back end, quantum encrypted system. So that is something which has been trademarked, and I'm incredibly proud of it. And I don't know when it will be operationalized. It's probably got a little while to go. But as a result of that innovation, I was pulled in as an advisor for the FactorPay supply chain solution, which is a global logistics and supply chain solution based on blockchain and is tokenized. So the idea is that the carriers, be they shippers, be it air freight, be it trucks, they can actually move their loads seamlessly across borders, 95% paperless solution, and they can actually exchange services on the blockchain with the Factor token. And this, I'm pleased to say, it's been an award-winning solution that is in at least 4 countries right now, and it's really geared up for something significant. And I provided the blockchain consulting approach specifically for the UK arm of the initiative. So I consider myself, unfortunately, I consider myself an expert in the Brexit process right now. So that's a very kind of condensed version of what I've been up to, and I'm pleased to say that my research approach was recognized by The Economist magazine back in 2013. So I think I must have done something right in that respect to get that kind of recognition. So I'm pleased to be on the program right now and sharing this information with you.
Thanks. So, can you go into more detail about blockchain's impact on global trade, specifically Brexit and China's Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the logistics and supply chain arena has been late to the party in terms of technological innovation, largely due to the complexity and also due to the rather conservative nature of that enterprise. But the innovation of blockchain now allows for end-to-end transparency. And only last week, in fact, a couple of days ago, Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, was stating how important that transparency was for the Belt and Road Initiative. And for anyone who doesn't know what the Belt and Road Initiative is, think of the Holy Roman Empire, but significantly enhanced. What China are trying to do right now is connect up all of the hubs which surround China to have a seamless flow of supply chain. Now, you imagine moving stuff over borders, especially with the stuff happening in Brexit right now, where the UK is trying to separate away legal frameworks that have been in place for over 40 years now, to split that apart and set up new trade agreements and so on and so forth is incredibly complicated, and to try and keep that calibrated and synchronized is incredibly difficult. In order to do that, you need a certain level of transparency and trust, and that's what the blockchain provides. So it allows somebody in France, for example, who has got very bespoke, specialized components that are required for, say, a car assembly line in Coventry, to move that from that small village in France, wherever that may be, all the way to Coventry. And during that entire journey, there is end-to-end transparency on where the goods are, you know, all the metrics related to that piece of equipment, so that at the end of the day, you've got more control over your supply chain. And the challenge with blockchain is that, by definition, for anyone who doesn't understand it, it aggregates information. So it's an immutable ledger, which means that you cannot change the information. Once it's on the ledger, it's there as a way of proving that something happened. And by definition, that is going to aggregate over time. So if something's aggregating over time, eventually that amount of data is going to be very difficult to mine, very difficult to search for information and to do anything with it. So it slows down over time, which is where quantum computing comes in. So what quantum computing does is it allows, it offers up an opportunity, and this is still theoretical at the moment because we haven't got to the point where we've got production grade quantum computers that are affordable to the masses of businesses out there. But eventually we'll get to the point where quantum computing allows us to speed up blockchain transactions and potentially create new cryptocurrency capabilities, which we've not even imagined yet, right? Related to distance and time. So I think once blockchain meets quantum computing, we will have no less than the fourth industrial revolution. There are threats related to that as well, because obviously you've now got something which is quantum capable. So one of the threats is that potentially you could have rogue elements who have quantum capabilities trying to attack the blockchain with malicious code, exploits, which could do things like control over 51% of the blockchain ledger, right? Which in one scenario could lead to ownership of that blockchain. But what quantum computing, on the other hand, allows us to do is to improve the way we encrypt information and potentially protect global manufacturers by having more secure methods of exchanging this very valuable blockchain information, which allows them to move parts in full transparency from point A across a border or borders to point B. So, I mean, in a nutshell, within 10 years, I think that quantum computing would be capable of figuring out some of the private keys used for securing blockchains and so on. So things like using quantum computing for brute force attacks on public keys and potentially private keys. But on the flip side of that, we could use quantum computing for good to secure the blockchain and make it faster. So it really is going to be a battle of minds to determine how this plays out. How it plays out, I don't know, to be honest. But I would like to have some sort of impact on things resulting in positive outcomes. That's basically where I am right now. So, so those are my kind of high level thoughts on it, and I'd be happy to field any more specific questions from you, Dustin, related to that, because it's such a big topic.
Is there more you could say about the extent to which developments in quantum computing will likely transform the blockchain?
Yes, yeah. So right now, the blockchain, the concept of a blockchain is that you've got essentially blocks which are linked through uh, through the transaction, and it's linear. It's very linear. In the future, there are going to be more capable protocols, things like the IOTA protocol, where you have a new transaction settlement and data transfer layer for the Internet of Things that essentially is no longer linear. It could take different routes, and it may not rely on the same failing points, right? So it's very early at the moment, but things like IOTA Tangle do allow for better network and security efficiencies. It's deemed to be quantum proof at the moment, and it introduces new ways of reaching consensus for decentralized systems. So it's kind of like the whole Betamax VHS battle from the early 80s. We don't know which protocol is going to be the one that rules them all, but I think it's definitely worth time investing looking at some of these new protocols coming up that ultimately allow for faster transactions, because that's the other main issue with blockchain, is that the speed of the transactions right now are nowhere near Visa's or MasterCard's transaction speeds. I think if I'm correct, you're probably lucky to get a couple of thousand transactions per second, whereas with Visa, you're looking at upwards of 50,000 transactions a second, which is significant. So if we want to, if blockchain wants to be taken seriously, it needs to overcome those issues of speed. And if it's to overcome those issues of speed, it must embrace some element of quantum computing, as far as I'm concerned.
And also, can you share with us the reason why you chose to open source your rapid aqua lifesave innovation?
That's a great question. Well, the Rapid Aqua LifeSave innovation, first of all, just a bit of background. It came about as a result of a friend of a friend drowning in open water whilst they were training for a triathlon. And it struck me that there wasn't a reliable method out there to save people's lives in open water in real time. So I put together some of the best innovations I'd come across in recent years, and came up with the Rapid Aqua LifeSave innovation, which has got roughly 14 different innovations at a high level. And by the time I finished it, I realized that it was the level of it would be nice if you could have simple ideas all of the time, but sometimes you need complex ideas to solve complex problems. This is a complex idea. And because of that, it would be incredibly expensive to try and patent the whole end-to-end solution. The other thing that most people don't know about patents is that I think over 90% of patents are unsuccessful because essentially you're locking down the intellectual property, and as a result of that, that could stifle innovation. Whereas if you look at the Linux model, Linus Torvalds open sourced Linux, I think it was back in 1991, and look where that has got now. I mean, he was smart enough to other models to build up around Linux, but he's fundamentally gone open sourced that core innovation to allow the network effect to kick in. For Rapid Aqua LifeSave to kick off, I mean, you're talking about, if I can give you a brief high-level overview, the idea is that somebody is you've got, there's two flavors. There is the early adopter version, and then there's the commercial version. So the early adopter version is designed to save swimmers' lives in open water, or elite athletes' lives in open water, whereby they have a smartwatch that can communicate directly with a smart wetsuit. And the idea is that if the wetsuit or the watch determine that somebody is struggling in open water, that nano floats would kick in on the wetsuit and bring the person to the surface whilst maintaining their body temperature. And the minute the person gets to the surface, that smartwatch or smart technology would connect immediately with a cluster of small sats. These are nano satellites, small satellites, which would be designed to be dedicated to receiving and transmitting with these types of watches. And at the minute that would happen, this would signal the emergency services. And on the back end, you would have a blockchain solution, which would kick in a smart contract, which this person would have subscribed to and determined the contract rules ahead of time. So you've got scenarios where should the person be saved, for example, it would say, okay, reach out to my next of kin and let them know immediately that I'm safe and sound. Those kind of things. You're not limited. You're only limited by your imagination and what goes into that smart contract. At a commercial grade level, what I would like to see, especially in the view of recent tragedies around the world, where it's taken up to 4 days or more to recover a black box in the 21st century, which I think is unforgivable. I think that we should have technology right now where the black box information should be relayed directly to a dedicated small satellite, so that if a plane ran into trouble, it would be able to do a load dump of that black box information up to the small sat immediately. And not only that, let's assume that there's a safe landing on sea. It doesn't always work out that way, but in this scenario, there's a safe landing on sea. The passengers are able to escape, but they escape with life jackets, life vests, life preservers, which are equipped with the same technology that exists in that smart suit. So the idea is that there is also a signal in the life jackets that goes up to the small sats. And so all of a sudden you've got a cluster now of passengers in the water. So you know exactly where they are, and emergency services would be notified a lot quicker. And you know, what you're doing there effectively is saving people's lives in real time, rather than doing a rescue and rather than doing a recovery mission days or months or years later. So the complexity comes because right at the back end, you've got a quantum encrypted solution, which, to my earlier point, not only secures the entire platform, but it also enables faster transactions, because this is the kind of stuff that can't wait. This is mission critical. And when I explain it like that, and when you understand that at the very back end you've got financial services involved, insurance companies and banks and so on, and the airline company, blah blah blah, that's an incredibly complicated solution, which would require governmental level involvement. And I realized at that point, after getting feedback from a number of professionals in the field, including an Emirates pilot, including an RCMP officer, which is equivalent to an FBI agent in Canada, as well as professors in nanomaterials and so on and so forth, and a blockchain expert, I soon realized that the only way to get this moving was to open source the innovation. But what I have done is trademarked the term rapid aqua life save, and that's trademarked against the end-to-end blockchain consulting approach. So long story short, it was a really complicated idea, but it also because it's ultimately saving people's lives en masse. When you think that 360,000 people per year at the moment drown, I think that it's worthwhile looking at to develop, but it's not something that you could do on your own. It's not something that a small or medium-sized company could do on your own. You'd have to be a Facebook or a Google or a government organization to pull this off. So that's really why I decided to open source it.
And thanks. And do you have any final recommendations for people who are interested in innovation with blockchain and quantum computing and the opportunities?
Absolutely. I would say start with Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and then move on to the Lean Startup by Eric Ries, all the while keeping this very relevant and real by networking in your local community. See if you can connect with a networking hub in your local community, and start whiteboarding ideas. Look at problems that people are trying to solve, be they big, medium-sized, or large, and see if you can come up with a value proposition, of an idea of value that somebody would actually invest in. And remember that there is the ability to build on existing ideas. There is that concept of incremental innovation. So it's not just a question of breakthrough innovation where you're trying to come up with something that nobody's ever done before. Look at opportunities, look at, enhance, like really focus on enhancing your pattern recognition skills to look at new opportunities. I'll give you an example. The more you read, the more you listen to, the more you see, the better your pattern recognition gets. So if I was to put a light bulb and a tree in front of you, and you walked away with a new innovation for energy storage, that would be fantastic, because trees are the actual bark of a tree is a fantastic way of storing energy, but most people aren't aware of that right now. So you've got all these renewable energy projects, but the biggest problem they've got is harnessing that energy and releasing it on demand. So I would encourage people to look for innovations in things like electrical cars, look for ways to socialize that, look for ways to spread that and allow the network effect to kick in, so that you remove things like range anxiety, where you're panicking because the car's going to run out of energy. So focus on where there's greatest need, and I think you'll definitely get the buy-in. And I mean, Rapid Aqua Lifesave is a great example of that. Everyone that I know would like their life to be preserved, especially if they're in an aircraft or swimming in open seas. So right there, you've got a use case that every single living being can relate to.
And thanks, Steve, for sharing today.
Oh, you're most welcome. Most welcome.
Yeah, I love to hear how things go with your business, and if we could do another follow-up interview in the future, that would be interesting.
I'd love to do that. And why don't we see if we can connect post-Brexit and see how far off the mark I was.
Oh, great. So let's see.